Welcome again to Navigating the College Admission Process in the Age of COVID-19. My name is Danielle Wilson-Sadler. I am from Student, Family, and School Services within Montgomery County Public Schools. I appreciate you joining us. We are excited about our Parent Academy to go, and we look forward to you joining us for more. At this time, I'd like to introduce our presenters. Harriet, if you'd introduce yourself.
Sure. Thank you so much, Danielle, and I always appreciate your offer for me to do these workshops. My name is Harriet Broder, and I'm the owner of Breakthrough Test Prep. Been doing test prep for about 40 years, but I must say this is the first time I've ever had to do test prep in the age of a pandemic. So this is all a learning experience for all of us. So hopefully I can share some information that will make you more at ease about what's going on in terms of the tests and college admissions for your team.
Shelley, would you now introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Shelley Levine. I'm an independent educational consultant. I founded College Bound about 25 years ago, and I look forward to sharing my expertise with you and help guiding you and your children through the college search, selection, and application process.
Norka?
Hi, good evening. I'm Norka Batia. I'm also an instructional specialist working with Danielle. It's nice to be here this evening. Thank you to Harriet and Shelley for helping us all out.
And everyone, just for a couple of housekeeping items, if you would, please make sure that you're on mute. We would appreciate that. And then two, if you have questions, by all means, you can use the chat button below at the bottom of your screen to actually write questions. And also, at some point, we will also add our evaluation or feedback form link so that you can provide us with feedback about this workshop at the very end. And we'll ask that you stay on to complete the evaluation so that we can have it, so that we can, in the spirit of continuous improvement, just make sure that we're meeting all of your needs. So with no further ado, please, Shelley, move forward.
Terrific. Well, thank you so much. And I know that in any given year, the college search, selection, and application process is confusing and complicated to many, to most. And I know that in the age of COVID-19, there are a lot of added layers. I attended a presentation by a college, some college folks, a little bit ago, and they kind of equated applying to college and being an admissions counselor in this age as really learning to fly when you're already up in the air. Everyone is kind of just, grasping at straws and trying to figure it out in the best way so that students are well represented and that students are properly evaluated because so much has changed. What I hope to cover tonight, and I'm going to do a short PowerPoint presentation, and then happy to take questions. So what I thought we would cover is what do colleges typically look for in their applicants when they are reviewing applications? And then what has changed this year? How has COVID impacted the college admissions process? And it has in many ways. Some of them in good ways, and I'll talk about those as well. What about my test scores and extracurricular activities? This is really related to COVID-19 and whether your student is a freshman, sophomore, junior, or senior. I think everyone is worried about at least their extracurricular activities. How will they stay engaged and involved in their high school? And if they're a junior or senior, they're certainly concerned about their standardized test scores. So we'll address that. And in the second half of the presentation, Harriet Broder will talk a lot about the nitty-gritty of standardized testing. How can I demonstrate interest without stepping foot on campus? So most college campuses are not allowing visitors on campus. Many, hundreds are closed to all students. Students are at home or somewhere doing remote learning, just like they are for elementary, middle, and high school. And then on some campuses, students are actually living in residence halls or apartments, and many have like one class, or maybe some have no classes that are person to person, but they're all virtual. Well, this is a time, the fall and the spring, when students and families typically visit college campuses to get a sense of campus life and how can they research and demonstrate interest about colleges now. And then related to that, how can you make the most out of a virtual experience? I think we've all done a remarkable job, the teachers, the instructional assistants, the administration, and the students, of course, in adjusting to this new situation of virtual learning. So I think that the students will be really well equipped to make the most out of virtual campus experiences. Okay, next slide. Okay, so first let's go to what's important. How do college admissions counselors read applications? And the most important thing that colleges are looking for are students who have strong grades and academic rigor. So I often get asked the question, is it better to get an A in a regular or on-level or honors course versus a B in an honors or an AP course? And the kind of cute answer is it's better to get an A in an honors or AP course. That being said, colleges certainly value students who choose to have a rigorous curriculum. Colleges and universities are institutions of higher education, they're learning communities, and so they really value students who like to learn and like to challenge themselves. There is a definite balance between whether or not one should take too many AP or honors courses so that it really interferes with other aspects of their life or their sleep or their ability to get together with friends or their ability to do well in a particular high school year. So it really is a balance. And I recommend, and colleges recommend, choosing a course load that speaks to the student's strengths. So if they are really good in math and science, they could challenge themselves in those subjects. If they're really strong in English and humanities, they can choose to challenge themselves in those subjects. And balance. So colleges are looking for A's and B's in a rigorous course load. And trend, which is the third item on the list, is really important. So it's best if every year a student can increase their academic rigor. Perhaps a freshman or sophomore year, 1 or 2 AP or honors courses, and then junior year add to that, and senior year add to that, so that the rigor is an upward trend and their grades are an upward trend. Oftentimes I get asked about, well, these two students have the same grade point average. Which one would be a student that the college might accept over the other? And let's just take a student who has a 3.5 grade point average. Well, a 3.5 can be comprised of a 3.0 one year, a 3.5 the next, and a 4.0 the following year. Or it can be a 4.0, the next year a 3.5, and the following year a 3.0. And since the best predictor of future success is the most recent success, a college would, of course, rather admit a student who has the upward trend, because they will be demonstrating that they will do well during their next year, which will be at college. I mentioned, the testing, and like I said, Harriet will talk a lot about that. But in the past, testing, standardized testing, SAT, ACT scores were really third when it came to evaluating an applicant. Grades and rigor typically were 1 and 2. This year and next year, it may come back to be number 3. But this year, because there have been so few opportunities for students to take standardized tests with school closures, really the SAT and the ACT simply couldn't get into buildings to test the students. So most colleges and universities in the US, over 1,600 four-year universities have become test optional or test blind. Now, test optional is not the same as test blind. Test optional means if you have strong scores, and strong is in the context of where do I stand relative to the applicant pool. So I take a look at the college's mid 50% scores. So a college will release that kind of information. The mid 50% of our students, let's say, tested between 1,200 and 1,300 on the SATs. And if a student falls squarely within that mid 50%, it's safe to submit your scores. If a student falls above that, by all means submit. But if a student falls under the 25th percentile, it's best to not submit your scores. Test blind schools, and there are dozens of them this year, are schools that even if you submit your scores, the university will not consider them in the application process at all. So usually when you are submitting an application, you have to earmark that you want to apply or you're planning to apply test optional. Test blind is not an option. If the college is test blind, they won't consider the scores. So that's what's happening this year. Many universities are instituting a 2 or 3 year pilot plan where they're assessing whether or not a student not having scores has impacted their success at the college level. And in all likelihood, they will find that the scores wouldn't have been accurate predictors of success in college. So they might go ahead and become test optional for the next foreseeable future. And some are instituting, like I said, a 2 or 3 year pilot. Demonstrated interest. So I mentioned that in the previous slide about how can a student demonstrate interest or visit a campus to, number one, find out if the college is a good fit for them, and number two, demonstrate that they are interested in attending the college. And the good part about the pandemic experience is that all students, regardless of their socioeconomic status, have the ability to research colleges online, whether in the future it's at their public library, whether it's on their phone, whether it's on their Chromebooks. Suddenly the playing field is level, and it's not just the students who have the means to fly across country to visit colleges that get to see a campus. Now, every college has instituted really rich experiences as far as visiting campus. There are fantastic virtual information sessions. There are great student-led tours on campus. So I recommend really going into the college's website and visiting campus online. Extracurricular involvement, colleges are looking to build a village, a town. And just like, let's say, the town of Rockville has grocery stores and other shops and mechanics and doctors and lawyers and dentists and athletes and dancers. So a college is building a community and needs students to fulfill all of these clubs and organizations. And the only way they can assess whether or not a student will be a contributing member in these ways is how have they made use of their high school years. So they will be looking very closely at how a student has contributed to their community, whether it's their high school community or their neighborhood community or their religious community. They will be looking for that. Now, one could say, what can a student do these days? There are a lot of virtual volunteer opportunities. There are jobs that some of my students have created, landscaping businesses, running errands for people in their neighborhood. So there are lots of ways, starting clubs that are all virtually run. So there are lots of ways. Students just have to be a little creative. Diversity of the student body. This is a big one. Colleges are looking to populate their campuses with students from all over the country. It's particularly challenging this year for students who live abroad to attend college in the US. Challenging, if not impossible. So colleges will really be relying on domestic students from all 50 states to populate their campus. Colleges are looking for students who demonstrate intellectual curiosity, who like learning. Maybe they do things outside of school. There are really cool courses that are online called Coursera, Coursera, and students can learn about nearly every topic under the sun through Coursera courses, or reading, or summer academic activities. So anything a student can do to demonstrate that they like to learn is valuable. Colleges are looking for students who fit into their community, and that would be an academic fit. Does the college have the program that the student is interested in studying? Does the college have the extracurricular activities that the student is interested in participating? So they're looking for a student to articulate their fit and to convince the college that they would be a good fit for the university. And another thing that's been impacted is the ability to receive financial aid and merit scholarships. So there are many colleges that have been really generous in terms of merit and financial need-based aid. That will be a little bit challenging for the students in the class of 2021. And it really is because so many of the colleges have been hit so hard by the coronavirus and students having to be off campus, some colleges refunding money, colleges having less than a full class of incoming students for the class of 2020. So colleges have really taken a financial beating, and many will have less in terms of merit and need-based aid, institutional aid next year. Next one. Next slide. So what I want everyone who's listening tonight to know is that you're not alone. I think it's really anxiety producing for students to think that what am I going to do because I'm not able to demonstrate my interest, I'm not able to get involved in extracurricular activities, I'm not able to take the standardized test. But colleges understand their parents of high school students, their parents of elementary school students, and of college applicants, and they understand what is going on. So they're very forgiving. What they want most is for students and their families to be healthy and mentally and physically healthy and put this process in perspective. So remember, when you're applying to college, it's not one moment of time. It really is your entire educational experience. And what's really demonstratable is 9th, 10th, 11th, and then your first semester of 12th grade. That will put you in context as an applicant. Think depth, not necessarily breadth. So what I mean by this is that if you're involved in a sport or a service activity or an academic interest, stick with those things versus getting involved in 8 different activities, shuffling the 8 every different year. So it's a way to develop leadership skills. The more involved you come in the program, the better that is. And also the more you can contribute to a college community. And thinking outside the box. So again, being creative in terms of volunteer experiences, in terms of jobs. One of my students is, selling clothing online, making jewelry, selling that online. Again, it takes more creativity, but there are lots of interesting things that one can do. How to demonstrate interest. I mentioned this. Attend virtual information sessions, attend virtual tours, connect directly with admissions counselors. So admissions counselors are saying that never in their life have they been more accessible to students and their families. All one has to do is email an admissions counselor, and they too are working from home or working from some site where they are in the office and they have access all day to receiving emails from students. So they welcome the opportunity to educate students about their university. Connect with current students. So if a student speaks to their school counselor or their friends and finds out who might have gone to that college, that's a great resource. Or if a student contacts the college, oftentimes the college will put them in touch with a current student that they can talk to. And this is for students who are in the application process right now, current seniors. Most colleges are very happy to do virtual interviews. Again, it's a way for the college to sell themselves, and it's a way for the student to articulate their interest and knowledge and interest in the college. Next one. Is there another slide?
I just pulled up making the most of your virtual visit experience. It's like that one. Do you see it?
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. Yes. So I mentioned meetings with admissions counselors, and when a student does a virtual information session, they will actually be sitting in a live presentation, and that admissions counselor will give them their name and contact information. So that's a great reference, because that's a person that you can continue to correspond with. As you are attending these virtual experiences, jot down notes, jot down what you think is unique about that college, so that when you are crafting essays or having an interview with the college, you can recount things that you learned during your information session. Watch your email, because once you start visiting colleges, whether that be virtually or on foot, the colleges will start corresponding with you and be sending you important information. Sometimes it's about applying for a scholarship. Sometimes it's a voucher for a free application. Sometimes it's for a minority program visit to campus. So it's really important that students check their email and choose an appropriate email. At this point, I'd say if you are a junior or senior in high school, you should develop an email address that you will designate specifically for colleges. When you're visiting colleges, I would always do it through the college's website. And again, develop relationships with the admissions counselor, because oftentimes that is the person who is directly responsible for reading your application. In many instances, that's the person who will make the decision on your application. So in summary, remember, you're not alone. We're all in this together. You have the assistance of your parents, of your school counselor, your teachers. All of your classmates are in the same situation. We will absolutely get out of it. Stay engaged in your classes at school, engaged in your process. Think of creative ways to stay engaged. Research colleges. So the next one is important: define your priorities. Lots of students don't know what they want to study or what field they want to go into. That's awesome. And at 16, 17, it's understandable. And in fact, most students who start out in a particular major ultimately change majors or change fields. That's just something good to know about yourself. And so you want to go to a college where there are lots of academic offerings. Others, know very specifically that they want to study engineering or nursing or business. So make sure that you find a college that has those programs. Some colleges are located in cities, some in very rural areas, others in suburban settings. Make sure you identify your priorities about where you want to live. Campus culture. Is it an academic environment where students love to get dressed up for football and basketball games, love the music scene, have a diverse student body, are very involved in fraternity and sorority life? The campus culture should match your particular priorities. Proximity to home. So it's important for you to know whether or not you want to be an hour drive from home. You're okay to fly. You're okay to go across the country. That's a really serious conversation that parents and students need to have. And affordability, of course, that's paramount in being able to afford the college without graduating deeply in debt. I look at graduation rates very closely to assess the quality of an undergraduate experience. And so you can compare and contrast. Colleges usually measure graduation rates in terms of 6 years. And while most students graduate in 4 years, they do gauge it in terms of 6 years because a lot of programs require 4 years in a summer or 4 years in a semester, especially engineering programs. So the government standard really is a 6-year graduation rate, and you want to compare and contrast. An endowment. So this is, again, in the age of COVID especially, some colleges have depleted endowments, and you want to be very careful about choosing a college that you feel will be able to serve you for your entire college experience. Work to your potential and make use of all the resources all around you. And thank you for attending. I see it's 6:25 or so, and I'm happy to stay on for questions. I haven't been watching the chat box, but are there any?
What I'm going to do before Norca asks those questions, I am going to just let the participants know I'm going to be changing the screen so that Harriet can present. Thank you.
Shelley, thank you so much for a wonderfully informative session. There's a couple of questions that we have. What advice do you have specific to starting community college before going off to university?
It's a great option financially and academically. Many colleges have articulation agreements between the community college and, let's say, University of Maryland, where if a student performs to a certain level, they can automatically articulate to a program at the university level. So it's the most affordable way to get a college degree. And also, since the first 2 years at community college, students are taking general education, distribution requirements, they can really explore a lot of different fields. Also, the faculty at community colleges are, I have found to be very supportive, very student-centered. The classes are small. So I'm a huge fan of community college.
Thank you, Shelley. We have another question around early decision. Do you
Yes.
think that's a good idea for a family that may need financial aid?
Generally, no. So for those in the audience who may not know what early decision is, It's a binding commitment that the student makes between themselves and the college, such that if they are admitted during an early round, the deadline is typically November 1st, and decisions are sent out December 15th, then the student is obligated to go to that university. Unless a family is able to pay full tuition at that university or has gotten an early financial aid read and is happy with that financial aid read, then a student should not apply early decision. Because if you get a financial aid read and then you get the offer of admission and that's what they offer you, then you are really obligated to go there. So you have to go in with your eyes wide open. Early decision is great in that you get an earlier answer, and it generally, the admit rates are much higher for early decision as opposed to regular decision. But if you need to compare financial aid packages, it's not an appropriate thing to do.
Okay, and we have one more question. Thank you so much for your expertise.
Sure.
We really appreciate it. In Montgomery County, we have a very large international, multilinguistic community. So what about your advice to applying to international colleges and universities through the Common App? Do you have any insights on that?
Many of my
The
students.
follow-up question is, what's the big difference between the 4-year program in the United States versus the 3-year degree in Europe?
Well, that's a great question. So many of my students have over the years applied to colleges in the UK, in particular, some in Canada, but I'd say the UK are probably some in France. The biggest difference are that colleges in the United States have more opportunities to explore majors and change majors, and that's why they're 4 years. Colleges in the UK and Scotland and Ireland and all across most European countries and Canada, students apply directly into a faculty, which is the same as a college. It's a discipline. And if you decide after year 1 that you want to change majors, you want to change your career path, you essentially have to start over again. So it's not an exploratory program at all. It's a very straight career path. The American system is really pretty much the only one in the world where liberal arts is such a thing, where students get to explore a wide variety of subjects. At other schools, other universities, a student knows exactly what they want to do, and that's why it's a 3-year program.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
We so appreciate your expertise. Thank you on behalf of the MCPS community, our families, and our students.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shelley. Okay, I guess I should begin, right? All right, probably from the slide you can tell what this is going to be about, okay? So let's just get going here. We're going to talk about all before COVID and during COVID, there's still the same questions about SAT versus SAT. So I will address that. Of course, I will address the big changes, and Shelley kind of addressed that as well, but we'll talk about that as well. But so we're going to talk about, we're going to give you a brief history of the tests, give you some Maryland stats, how to determine the better test. You might even be able to find out what your better test is if you're lucky, and then mainly try to understand the differences between the two tests. Okay, next slide. Next slide. Okay, the SAT's been around longer than I've been doing this, 1926. Okay, and it was always more popular in the Northeast, in the Midwest, and the West. Since the early 80s, there have probably been over 6 or 7 major changes in scoring and format. Many of you may not even remember the most recent change, which was 2016. I do, because I had to totally rewrite my curriculum, but I kind of like change. But anyway, they're trying to get it right. And we'll talk about getting it right when we address COVID in a few minutes, okay? All right, like I said, the most recent change, and changes always begin with the PSAT, and the most recent one was, I can remember that day, October 14, 2015, or March 5th, 2016. So that's the most recent changes to the test. Next. Okay, so I thought this was kind of cute. SAT stands for nothing, okay? It used to stand for the Scholastic Aptitude Test when it was first developed. Then in 1990, it was changed to Scholastic Assessment Test. And then it was changed to the 94, the SAT 1 Reasoning, and the subject tests were called SAT 2s. Okay, in 1997, they decided the test SAT does not stand for anything. So there you go. I had to take the dots out of all my literature because it doesn't stand for anything. I just thought you guys would appreciate that one. Okay, next. Okay, this is a quick review of the major changes that I didn't go into the 2016 one because we will address that later. Okay, and I've been doing this since 1978. So when I first started doing this, there was no such thing as a test prep book. You couldn't get your hands on it. You didn't know what a full test would look like. People would come out of the test, and that's how they develop test materials, and they kind of have memorized questions. But in 1979, the Truth in Testing Law was passed, and you can thank Ralph Nader for that. You need to go back a little bit. Go back one. That's okay. Next one. There we go. Go back one. There you go. ACT, go back, go back, go back, go back. We're still on SAT. Go back. Go back. Go back.
I'm sorry, something's going on with my computer, so that's why it's doing that. So now let's see.
Okay, if you can't go back, we'll just.
Yeah, I'll just go back. One, is it up or back? Back.
Back.
Okay.
Back. Back. Back.
There.
There you go. Congratulations.
Thank you.
There you go. All right.
Technical difficulties, but it's okay. We got this.
No worries. All good. Okay. So in 1980, I was able to get my hand on some tests. In 1980, you could get a book of tests, and there was only 5. Then in 94, maybe some of you are listening. Maybe you took the test in 94. There used to be antonyms on the test. There was a grammar section on the test. Gone. Okay. So then in 95, this is interesting. The tests the scores were recentered. Now, what does that mean? Recentered mean if you took the test in, let's say, prior to 1995 and your SAT score was a 600, if you were to change that into SAT scores today, that would be a 680. They gave everybody about 80 points in the reading and about 20 in the math because the average score dropped so much. It was way below 500. It was around 420 verbal and about 480 math. So that's when they kind of inflated the scores, and they've stayed that way. So the scores are just still inflated for whatever that means. All the kids are compared with the same score, so it's a non-issue at this point. Just a little bit of trivia, all right? In 2005, the University of Southern California system decided, we don't like the SAT, we like the SAT 1, we're gonna get rid of it. College Board panicked, and we'll talk about the panic mode they're probably in right now, later when it comes to COVID. But they panicked and they said, okay, we're going to change the test. Since you like the SAT 2 writing, they changed the test. And they got rid of the analogies. They made the reading more extensive. And they added the grammar to the test. And they made the test longer. That caused kind of, that's when people started looking at the ACT. We'll come to that in a minute. In 2009, score choice was added and super scoring. Score choice means, I don't like my May score. My June score was really good, so I'm going to send that. Super scoring means they can, my May score for math was really good, and my March score for reading was good, so I'm just going to send those scores. By the way, they do see both scores. They just don't see the higher reading, the higher math. That's how they do super scoring. Next. Now we're at ACT. That started a few years later. It's always more popular in the Midwest and Southern states. I've actually talked to parents who didn't even know how to spell SAT because they grew up in Chicago, but that's all they knew was ACT. In 2007, that's when, now I always had like 1 or 2 people doing SAT in the 40 years I've been doing this, but since 2007, more and more people are taking it, okay? Now, ACT, 2014, more people are taking the ACT. Now, SAT is more popular for what it's worth. And again, popular is in quotes today in the age of COVID. Like I said, we'll come back to that. Okay, next. ACT changes, not too many. It was started as an alternative to the SAT. It was also used for placement, and it was an indicator of academic readiness, and we'll go over the differences between the two tests in a bit. They did recenter the scores 2 points. The scoring on the ACT is 1 to 36, SAT 200 to 800. 2005, a 30-minute essay was added, optional, and 2015, the 40-minute essay. Now it's a 40-minute essay. Okay, next. Okay, about over 2 million kids of the class of 2019 took the SAT, okay? Of course, I don't know if you guys realize it, but you should, especially now in the age of COVID, there is a school day test. Now, what does that mean? There's national administrations. The next national administration, which of course now is kind of whatever, is supposed to be, actually they added a couple, September 26th, October 3rd, okay, who knows, but they are doing school day tests. What does that mean? The high school can decide, the county decides when to do a school day test. Right now, the school day test, there's no school day test, I don't believe, scheduled for the county for obvious reasons. Some of the private schools are doing one. One is doing one on October 3rd, I think, and first week in October. Some private schools are doing it in 2 weeks. None of the public schools are doing a school day test in September, October, as we speak now, for obvious reasons. Okay, next. Okay, I put in some additional facts from Maryland because so many of my students go to the University of Maryland, Towson, Montgomery College, Frostburg. There are many good schools in the state of Maryland, but let's focus on U of M. Okay, let me see here. Let me see. Most students in Maryland do take the SAT. It's always been that way. It's still that way with me. More kids take the SAT than the ACT. And when we get to the differences, I'll be able to explain probably why that is. And again, even when more people nationally took the ACT, SAT has always been more popular in this area. Next. Okay, you can see right here, this is pretty self-explanatory. Montgomery County, class of 2018, the SAT participation rate was almost 66% versus, which went up from 2017. Next. Okay, let's get to the nitty-gritty. We're going to drill down a little bit and talk about the differences between the tests. Now, you can go to my website. I usually give this as a handout when I do in person, but we're not in person. I don't get to see you guys, but I do appreciate you being here virtually, that's for sure. If you go to my site, or have your team go to my site, right on the homepage, you can take the SAT versus the ACT test. It's 11 either-or questions. Here are the first 4 to just get an idea of what they're like, what the questions are like. And again, it's 11 either-or questions. So I ask the students to pick the choice that fits them best. If you want to do it, we can upload that on the chat page there. I guess that's called a chat page. Okay, and you can take the test. You can have your team take the test. Like I said, it shouldn't take more than a minute. I say that because you don't want to sit there and overthink the questions. It's just go with the one that hits you first. What fits you the best? Okay. I would say this is probably about 80–90% on target. What I tell parents who say, oh, I know my student is an ACT student, or I know my student is an SAT student, I said 9 times out of 10, the results fit what you already know about your team. Next. Okay, also on the website are skill set assessments, okay? When they changed the SAT, the skills overlap a lot more than they did. So if your students take the skill set assessment test, they're going to say, Mom, these are the same questions, right? Because the skills overlap so much more, okay? And what the team does, and this shouldn't take more than 2 minutes, is they rank, you can see here, they rank, I enjoy reading books from different genres. I hate to read. I'm going to put that at 1. Get it? Okay, so they're just going to self-rank themselves. And then there's 16 questions that they self-rank. Then they add up the numbers. If they have 1 for number 1 and 3 for number 2, etc. Then there's a conversion table. They see, oh, my skills are between a 620 and a 650 in the reading, writing. They're between 680 and 700 on the math. So you can actually get a potential score range that your skill sets fall into, hence know what a good goal for your team would be by just taking the skill set assessments, which is a really quick way to find out, you know, where your teen skills fall in terms of an SAT or ACT. Caveat, this does not test how well a student applies those skills, okay? Obviously, the test does. So this test how well they rank the skills that they have that they're needed. You need these skills to be strong to do well on both these tests. Next. That's the ACT one. You see it's the same. We might do that, but anyway. Next. Okay, so let's go over the differences, okay? The math on the SAT is skewed more toward algebra and advanced concepts, and there's fewer concepts tested. There is a non-calculator section, which makes some kids crazy, but to be honest, most students have told me the non-calculator section, if you practice enough, you really don't need a calculator, okay? Especially if they have a flair for math. All right, the ACT math is skewed more toward geometry and more advanced topics, okay? Calculators used throughout the test. I might add that the SAT math has a 4 choice. The ACT math is 5 choice. All the other questions on the SAT or ACT are all 4 choice, just for the record. The grammar and rhetoric, well, College Board was very, very clever. They decided to steal the format of the ACT grammar, and that's what they did. So the grammar sections of both tests, they may be labeled differently. The ACT calls it English. The SAT calls it grammar, writing language, but they're pretty much the same tests, okay? The reading on the SAT tends to be a little bit more nuanced. There's actually it's 52 questions in 65 minutes. What a College Board did, and they were very smart, when they changed the test in 2016, they gave students more time on every section. So let me go back to the math. They have 45% more time on the math SAT than they do on the ACT. On the grammar, they have 3 to 33% more time, though most kids don't need extra time for either of those, just for the record. On the reading, they have 43% more time on the reading SAT over ACT. On the science section, it doesn't exist on the SAT, which a lot of students like. Is it testing science? No, it's reading charts and graphs and data. And that's represented visually rather than in words. I might add though, when the SAT was changed, they did add some charts and graphs to the reading section, to the writing language section. So there's about 5 or 6 sections, 6 questions in the whole reading and writing language test that are based on interpreting graphs, whereas the ACT has a whole section, 35 minutes, of interpreting graphs and charts, not on the SAT. So, and that's the end, that's the last section, and a lot of kids don't like it, mainly because they're ragged by then, and they hate reading charts and graphs, so that's something to consider. All right, next section. Next slide, I should say.
So Harriet, before you go on to that next section, can we go back to that last slide?
Yes. Well, somebody can. Last slide, yeah.
When my kids were all in high school, I had 3 boys, they were all in high school, the rumor was, and all the other parents advised me, boys should take the ACT. And I never really understood why. And there was this rumor that boys do better on the ACT, and this is the first time I've ever seen it compared in such a beautiful way that you're doing. Mm-hmm. But now it makes sense to me that my boys did better on the ACTs than they did the SATs. And I would say it probably has to do more with that nuanced reading in the SAT versus the straightforward reading in the ACT. And my sons were math and science oriented, and they loved the reading comprehension and charts graph part.
There you go.
And I would say with my youngest son who had special needs, he had the accommodation of using a calculator. So now I finally understand why having access to that calculator helped him with the ACT.
Right, there you go. I appreciate you saying that. Yeah, so that's why boys, there's a reason why some boys, and not all, by the way, especially if there's really slow readers, because of the timing on the ACT, they do have to work much faster. Let me put it in perspective. On a reading passage on the ACT, which is anywhere from typically 800 to 1,000 words long, 10 questions. They have 8 3/4 minutes to deal with that passage, reading and answering the questions. On the SAT, the passages generally are between 700 and 800 words, 10 questions. They have 13 minutes. That's a big difference in time. And that's why a lot of kids don't like the ACT, because they feel so pressed. And again, and then the math too, they have to push. But if they're math oriented, it's not a big deal, like your sons were. Okay. But thank you for sharing that.
Thank you for explaining that. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, here's some more, more about format differences. Both have a penalty for guessing. On the old SAT, when I'd have to work with kids, some kids I would tell guess, some kids I wouldn't, but you don't have to worry about now. Every kid should guess because there's no penalty. Okay, like I talked about the 4 choices. The format for the grammar is the same on both tests. The genre and writing style of the new SAT excerpted from are excerpted from similar disciplines. Math is more related to school math. The old SAT, kids in the 7th grade could get a 700 on the old SAT. You really need to have the math. If kids haven't had Algebra 2, they're definitely at a deficit for taking the SAT math, okay? Let's see. Okay, I guess that's it because we went over the other stuff before. Next. Okay, now we're in the age of COVID, aren't we? How could we forget? All right, as we know, if kids can't take the test, how can they submit them? That's why colleges are being much more lenient about schools submitting test scores. I'm really surprised more aren't going test blind, but it seems to me just under 1,500 are now test optional. Prior to COVID, you should know 1,100 were test optional. Now, how many four-year colleges are in the United States? Just under 3,500, okay? Or 3,400, I should say. So at this point, somewhere around 60% are test optional, and that's something to consider. And as Shelley, okay, so in other words, let's go over the advantage of not submitting them, okay? Obviously, the stress of not having a test is wonderful, okay? They can do other things. These kids are under enough stressful pressure not to have to worry about taking a test and preparing for it. Obviously, not spending money on test prep is something for families who have to make budget cuts. And so many families, so many parents have been furloughed or on work, intermittent work leave. They don't know when they're going to go back to work, if they're going back to work. So they don't have to spend any money on a test prep program. It allows students to spend the necessary time adjusting to online learning and studying. So that's a good advantage. The time factor, the stress factor, I'm totally behind that. And what I like to do is I have on my website how to self-coach for the SAT and how to self-coach for the ACT. And I urge you to check that out because I know a lot of you are like, we can't afford a $50 course, much less, $1,000 course or whatever. So I've outlined how a student can really self-prepare, and you can even do free Q&A with me, okay? All right, disadvantages of not submitting your test score. So that will be the next slide. And there's, let's see here. I think there's 2 slides for this. Advantage, again, oh, that's weird.
Did you want me to go back?
Yeah, go back.
Okay.
2. Go back 2. There you go. That's it.
Okay.
One more. No, next. Go up.
One more?
One more down. Yeah, go forward. There you go.
Okay.
Advantages of submitting the scores. Okay, GPAs vary from school to school as there is not a reliable metric of consistency. Isn't that cutesy? I found that somewhere in some article. What does that mean is what's a polite way of saying there's too much grade inflation, right? You know, does an A from Sidwell Friends equal an A from Podunk High School regular class? I don't know. You know, I don't want to be, I can't be the judge of that, but basically that's what that means. Because teachers vary in terms of their what variables they use to give a student an A, a B, or C. So if teachers vary, counties vary, states vary, school, etc. So that's why a lot of schools like to have a test score. Colleges that are classified as most selective, very selective, accepted rate is 35% or below. Submit scores are significantly above the school's midpoint range. This is what Kelly was talking about. Above the 50% midpoint range, that's where you want to start. That's when you want to submit those test scores, okay? Another reason, a couple other reasons a student might submit a test score, even if they're not high. If a student is underrepresented minority or comes from a disadvantaged background, any score in that school's median range should be submitted. Okay. All right. Next slide. If the applicant is a recruited athlete aiming for an NCAA Division I or II institution in any score that satisfies the NCAA requirement, submit your test score. For D3 schools, send any score in the median range, even from the bottom. As of this writing, merit scholarships are traditionally based primarily on high test scores that dramatically supersede the school's midpoint range, okay? Test scores are not truly test optional for certain students in particular groups applying to top schools. And will colleges assume poor test scores if not submitted? That's a $64,000 question. I might add, this just came out. The California system says, even though they're test optional, they will not look at test scores at all. So they're saying test blind, but they're not declaring themselves test blind. So that's the latest. That's the latest on that. Okay. Next. Little trivia for you guys. Okay. Let's get past the COVID. You can take the SAT as many as 12 times. As you're thinking right now, I would love my student to take the test once. Okay. So I hear where you're coming from. Next. Majority of students, over 50%, score higher when they take that test a second time. Just because the first time you do anything, everybody's a little bit on edge. So they know what it feels like to sit there for 3 hours. So that's why most kids do better the second time. Next. Most colleges do super score. That does not super score. Okay. All right. And that means they're going to take the highest score from two different administrations, from a higher math, or a higher reading from two different administrations. Next. Many top tier schools, Brown, Pomoa, Annos, will take the ACT in lieu of SAT subject tests. Okay. Most students who take the SAT and ACT cold get comparable scores. That's an interesting one, but that's my experience too, but I had read that. Number 6. Okay, now here's some admissions criteria. The highly selective schools, I just left off the charts. You know, 1,500 plus, that's what you need. Okay, these are just highly selective, not the really selective, okay? So this is like the top 10%. Obviously, the highly selective is more like 5%. Selective, majority of accepted freshmen, top 25% of high school graduating class. Those are the score ranges. Traditional, top 50% score ranges. Liberal, you can see some score ranges. Open, you know, the purpose of this is there's a school for everybody. You know, I hear this from my students all the time, and I say, you're not allowed to say this. I'm going to fail the test. You cannot fail. Okay, you can get a score that you may not be happy with, but you cannot fail this test. And there's a college for every student.
Harriet, we have a question from the chat.
Okay.
If you only get to take the SAT test once, should you submit your scores or skip it?
Well, it depends. Like I said before,
look at the score was 1350.
Yeah, 1350 is a great score, but what you want to do, you start with looking at the schools and making sure that he's at least above the median range for that school. And they publish that with the median ranges, it's 25% or 75%. So if it's above the median range, I don't know, is he an athlete? Do we know?
I don't know. Valerie, you can unmute yourself and ask directly if you'd like to.
Is your son an athlete?
No, she says.
Okay, just look at the schools because 1350 is a very respectable score, and there's a lot of schools that will give you money for 1350.
Daughter.
Daughter, your daughter. You get my point? Okay.
Yeah. Well,
All right.
let's
So
let's
check the
always
median
assume the
range.
highest scores come from the women.
There you go. I should know that, right? Okay.
And I wanted to do a time check and just let everyone know that it is 7 o'clock now. However, if you are willing to stay on and you have more questions, certainly we are here to stay on. So just let us know if you have more questions, and we can go into the question phase now, Harriet.
Sure.
That's okay.
That's fine.
Thank you. I'm going to pull the, I'll go to stop sharing, and then we'll. Are there any questions? Okay, let's see.
So I don't want to speak for Valerie, but I think her question was so interesting. So her daughter has a score of 1350, has taken it one time.
Right. That's it. And it's all about.
Oh, hi, Valerie.
Yeah.
I guess if that was my daughter and she did that rocking well on the first time.
I think it's impressive.
Wow.
So maybe, yeah,
Well,
done.
I know. We had taken a prep class and she was hoping to take it 2 or 3 times. So it was kind of disappointing that, you know, I mean, we're signed up in October, so that may still happen, but it's hard. Right. And it's hard to know when a school says, you know, score test optional, whether you should, you know, when you have a score like that, if you should skip it or.
Well, you got to look at the school, what their admissions is. In other words, last year, the 50% range was between 1,100 and 1,250. Oh my God, you better submit those scores.
Yeah, right.
That's all you got to do. Okay.
So Harriet, I have a follow-up question for you. Khan Academy has come out with a whole access to free SAT and ACT prep. I think it's actually just ACT prep.
And they must have just come out because they've had the SAT prep for a long time.
Yeah, and so do you have experience with students doing the self-guided prep on Khan Academy? Has that been effective?
Well, for my students, I don't know about the ACT because it just came out. Okay. But I know my students who do Khan, it's helpful that all the tests are there. You know, you have 10 College Board tests there. There used to be only one ACT. So like I said, most of my students all do SAT. So I'm kind of like, it's interesting how I've kind of removed from that a little bit. But I would say, yeah, if in lieu of nothing, go to Khan Academy. Absolutely. It's all about practice. You can't practice enough. Like I said, on my homepage, I have how to self-coach yourself to a higher SAT score, how to self-coach yourself to higher ACT score. You may want to have your daughter check that out, Valerie, because it's everything she really needs. Okay.
I have another question about like religious schools and you're like applying to those schools if you're not that denomination. Like my daughter, she's an Irish dancer and it's a very Catholic sport and she's interested in applying to a couple of Catholic schools, but we are not Catholic. And I just wonder, is that a wise thing to do? Or, I mean, do you get discounted at all because you're not that denomination?
I don't know. I've never had that question. That's the first time. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm curious about that.
Valerie, my son applied to a few religious-based schools because he was a crew athlete, and they actually recruited him, and we went and visited, and I did not find that experience. I found
that's great.
Schools to be very opening and welcoming.
Okay, that's really good to know.
Like Notre Dame, isn't that considered a Catholic school? Because I've had all kinds of kids go there.
That's one of the ones she wants to apply to. So.
Right. I would think not. I would think it's all about being successful on their campus and being a good fit, and they want a variety of types of students.
Okay.
What are her top 3 choices, Valerie, if you don't mind sharing, or top 5, whatever?
Oh no, actually, she's
Yeah.
really interested in Boston College,
Okay.
That's-
Notre Dame. She really likes the University of Wisconsin at Madison, but she's worried about the size.
Okay.
Where else? She's also interested in Case Western Reserve,
Okay.
and then University of North Carolina.
Okay.
She's interested in genetics, she thinks. So,
That's
yeah.
awesome. My cousin actually, a little trivia for you. My cousin, he actually was the quarterback in the Rose Bowl one year. And it was
Oh,
the
wow.
year that my mother died, and her name is Rose. So we were all like, oh, but yay, too.
Oh, my gosh.
One. So yeah, just a little trivia. And his experience as a male, he had a good time. I think Madison, although the university is pretty big, Madison is a community around it, and it's kind of embraces the school. So
Yeah.
I would advocate for Madison for sure. And then one of my good girlfriends, her daughter went to Boston College and had a really good experience as well.
Yeah, that's why I asked about the early decision, because Boston College is really her first choice, and she feels like it's the only school she's seen that's like a perfect fit for her. But I'm really nervous about that whole not being able to compare financial packages.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it seems sort of a risky thing to do, but
Yeah.
And the advice I got raising 3 boys and having to pay for college herself
Wow.
was to really look at private institutions who will give more money.
Right.
yeah, I heard
A lot of
that.
changed during COVID, but a state institution is not going to be able to give a huge amount of scholarship. And then
Right.
university, if you're looking at North Carolina, so University of North Carolina is not going to be able to give you a lot of support financially, but Duke University maybe, and that's a Catholic school as well, but they're very, very famous for their work in genetics.
Oh, wow, I didn't
So
know
you
that.
might do
Okay.
a search specific to genetics to see what universities come up.
Right. Okay, that's good to know.
And Valerie, my daughter is at Trinity right now. She Trinity College, liberal arts college up in Hartford. And I know they have a dynamic science program. And in terms of monies, wow, she did very well. Very
Wow. Okay. That's good to know.
It's, it kind of has that feel of a Georgetown.
Yes.
Much smaller, but good place
Right.
to go. So just wanted to share that with you as well.
Thank you.
Also, too, you can get money if the average score is, let's say, the median range is like 1150 to 1250 or something. You can get merit money.
Oh, okay.
So that's
Right.
something you want
Okay.
to think about.
Okay. That's good to know.
And one more
we
thing
like
I wanted
money.
to add to everybody that's here, that's something that I found out that really did work to my benefit. Once they awarded her financial aid package, it wasn't sufficient. And so I actually went back and wrote a letter and just was very, candid, transparent, and sweet. Nonetheless, but just letting them know she was really excited. She wanted to be there. Here's why we needed additional monies, and it worked. So many people had said that to me previously. I'm like Norca. I have 3 daughters who I had to put through college myself. And so was always looking for creative ways to finance college. So that was just something to let you know that certainly if they come back with a figure that you're not pleased with, you can always go back and ask, because they have those huge endowments.
And the other
That's actually really
to
helpful.
make sure that those AP credits are being acknowledged. So what most kids don't really understand until they get to college is those AP credits, when you take the AP exams, count as university credit. And some schools will give more credit for those than others. So
Okay.
I've known students to begin university with as many as 21 college credits already under their belt. That's an entire year of college, almost 2 years saved.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Exactly.
work that too.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
So it's 7:09 now, and we don't want to keep everybody. We just want to say thank you, first of all, to Harriet and also to Shelley. Just let her know that we're truly thankful for her coming on and presenting with us. Also wanted to say thank you to Valerie for joining us. Get the word out about the Parent Academy to our families. I know that there were lots of back to school nights tonight. So certainly many families were, busy there, but we offer a number of workshops, and we look forward to you joining us again.